and therefore I propose to wrap up the debate. I'll give way if there's an honourable member who would wish to speak. I'm not sure whether Kelman or Lowe. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is
Yes. Okay, honourable member. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have practiced law since 1989 for some 24 years. Been called to the bar, since 1988 in England, 25 years. I have been a member of one or two of these honorable houses for 22 years. And I have seen multiple motions of no confidence brought in this honorable chamber. I have seen a leader of the opposition bring a motion against the then Minister of Housing, Ms. Liz Thompson. And the Prime Minister of the day found it his duty to defend her from up front. I have seen, sir, matters of no confidence brought by a leader of the opposition against the Prime Minister. And the Attorney General found it his duty to defend the Prime Minister. I, sir, equally too, have faced one. And I, sir, would have brought one against the former Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, which drew from the other side 4 years ago the now famous quip, "It should be punished with laughter." And indeed, sir, the CLICO policy shareholders have truly been punished, as well as the employees of CLICO, as we have learned as recent as yesterday, as more are being retrenched in the absence of a resolution to their problems. So we have reached a peculiar stage in this country where honorable members of this chamber clearly believe that it is not their responsibility to share with the public, nor do they understand the extent to which communication with the public is perhaps the most important thing that can be done in difficult and troubling times. Indeed, sir, the average man in the street refers to the Prime Minister as still asleep, having gone back there too after the election. And the average man in the street is responding to this motion through their own petition by reflecting the fact that this government appears to operate in a different land, to different circumstances, that is oblivious to their suffering, to the fact that the Minister of Finance has presided over cuts that he's not even appropriately studied or indeed placed for study, if we are to accept the words of the Honourable Prime Minister, who has indicated that he had in September to order a study to determine the implications of the $50 million in cuts ordered by the Minister of Finance in the budgetary statement. Now, sir, we have sat in a cabinet on this side too, and we would not know how to announce to the public $50 million in cuts that will instill fear and panic among the public servants of this country, to the point where on a Thursday afternoon before the end of August, postmen were called into a meeting and indicated that they would not be coming back to work beyond the end of August. Workers at the Soil Conservation Commission were not paid. and still have not been paid in some instances. Workers across other government departments and statutory corporations remain worried and in panic, only to be told about a computer glitch, and then thereafter to be told that the Minister of Finance announced these measures without the appropriate study being made. Now, sir, the mere fact that the Prime Minister can come last week and say that savings are being found is the next strongest piece of evidence that confirms the guilt of the Minister of Finance in failing to do his job. Because in circumstances where you are galloping towards a double-digit deficit, for a Minister of Finance to lay estimates in this honourable chamber reflecting expenditure that is neither mandatory nor immediate to growth suggests to us, sir, that the Minister of Finance displayed a flagrant disregard for the needs to be able to curtail expenditure as a necessary precursor to the stabilizing of the Barbados economy. Now, sir, whether it is the IMF in their statements to the press, and we await the Article 4 independent consultation, or whether it is the Caribbean Development Bank last year in the press release after their board meeting, or whether it is other international institutions, including Standard & Poor's, who base their downgrade, and Moody's, who base their downgrade of the Barbados economy on the basis, sir, of unsustainably high deficits as well as high debt, such that Barbados is now one of the 10 most indebted countries in the world. The reality is, sir, that we have a situation that is perilous. And we have a situation, sir, where the government of Barbados displays total and utter contempt, not just for the 74,000 people who voted for the opposition, but I am happy to report to the country, sir, that we, in less than a week, have already collected almost 25,000 signatures, over 1,000 online as well, in addition to that 25,000. And given the fact, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Let's have some order, please.
I'm not. Mr. Speaker, sir, mercifully, the people of Barbados will see the attitude of this government towards their plight and suffering. And mercifully, Mr. Speaker, the people of Barbados will understand why they are suffering. Because if a government can treat to the people who go to the hospital in a way that sees them not providing them with the adequate sums because there is one chance at life and one chance alone. And in your constituency, Mr. Speaker, on Friday night, I stumbled upon that accident. And when I read the next morning that a person had died after waiting for an ambulance in this country for an hour, I say to you, Mr. Speaker, that these decisions that we make in here affect the livelihood or the right to live of citizens of this country. And I say to you, sir, that almost after 25 years at the bar and 22 years in this parliament, that I understand, sir, that we have a clear recognition that while concerns have been laid in this honourable chamber, sir, that this government has chosen to remain silent thus far. And one can only assume, sir, as is the case in court and in any other situation where allegations are made, that silence is contempt. And the Minister of Finance stands guilty as charged. But you know, sir, you know what the real issue is? You know what the real issue is, sir? You know what the real issue is, sir? That the price of the vote that has been extracted by members on that side is their silence. Because they, more than anybody else in Barbados, have undermined the Minister of Finance. And they, more than anybody else, have said that the Prime Minister ought to move him. And they, more than anybody else, and they've not only said it to members on this side, they say it when they're eating pudding and sauce on a Saturday. They say it when they are drinking. They say it when they are liming. They say it to international bodies. And it is clear that they could not seek to defend what is the indefensible, sir. You know, sir, the tragedy of all of this is that this debate is not about today. This debate speaks to the future direction of this country. And on the 14th of August, sir, when I spoke to this honorable chamber, I indicated then that we would wait and see. We thought the measures were ill-conceived. We thought there were a hodgepodge of measures, but we would wait and see. And all that spewed forth thereafter, sir, was a series of confusion, missteps, breaches of the law. And it stands to be noted, sir, that in spite of everything that has been done by the Commission of Inland Revenue, their actions remain illegal. In spite of everything that the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Commerce has said, that the municipal solid waste tax remains illegal, with no body vested at law to collect it. In spite of everything that has been said, the subcommittee of the social partnership with the Minister of Finance in town, but then if he wouldn't go to the bilateral meeting of the IMF, why should he go to meet with the private sector and union movement for the report of progress on the budgetary initiatives in circumstances where at the national consultation it was made clear that this government's biggest failing is lack of implementation. And what happened at that subcommittee of the social partnership on Friday, sir? When they asked about initiative after initiative, the only progress that could be reported upon was the consolidation tax, which, as we know, is of dubious legal application. When they asked, sir, about the definition of direct tourism services, when the controller of VAT, control of customs, and the person in charge of the VAT division issued a letter to the tourism providers setting out what could and could not be considered, only for that letter to be withdrawn, creating more confusion because people were told in the car rental business that it would include them in the reduction of the VAT. People in the restaurant sector were told that. And the private sector, up to Friday last week, could not receive a definition for who would be a beneficiary of a tax, in spite of the fact that the reduction of the tax was to kick in since 3 weeks ago on the 1st of October. Sir, that is the abysmal incompetence that this country has now been forced to accept and endure from a government. But it gets worse, sir. When we tell you that this is a government about pronouncements, anything to rush and make it look good. Trinidadians have a saying, making as if. And this morning, a Minister of Tourism got up in here, give me the statement, please, to make as if. To make as if. And what he should have been doing, if you want to do something, then the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Tourism should lay the memorandum of understanding, signed with Sanders on the table in Parliament. But let's see what we're talking about. The government has told us, the same Minister of Finance in his speech in the budget, that the government of Barbados will be taking out a loan from the Chinese government to build at Ammon Beach Village. And in fact, sir, if we are to use the English language, which is the only language which we know how to use, I quote him, these, at page 35, these will be done by accessing low-cost financing from the People's Republic of China for the reconstruction of the properties which will then be sold and or reopened under international brand, etc. Sir, today, the Minister of Tourism tells us that they are now in discussions with the Chinese. But that doesn't surprise me, sir, because the time at which the Minister of Finance made that statement to this country, there had been no application to the Chinese for any money to build anything. And then today, we have incentives being announced for a property that is not even owned by the government of Barbados, and that which is subject only to an agreement of sale. Our deposit to come, sir, from whom? From the National Insurance Scheme in advance of knowing whether the Chinese will finance the project or not. Disgrace. So what will happen?
That is a disgrace.
If the Chinese do not continue? The future generations of this country, sir, will carry $600 million in debt because of the liabilities entered into by the government of Barbados. And you know what is sad, sir? They talk about Grenada. Do you know that in Grenada, Sandals is opening, Mr. Speaker, and that the Grenadian government is not having to invest 1 single cent in the hotel for Sandals to open, which should open in 2 months? That over 12 months of refurbishment have been done. But in Barbados, a country that distinguished itself for its tourism product, there is so little confidence in the economy of Barbados that the private sector will not raise a cent to put into that investment that the government is now running headlong to do. I could say it no better than the Honourable Member for St. Michael North in quoting Sparrow's lyrics. When they're broken, you can get it all for nothing. And that is exactly what is happening. And that is why action has to be taken, not next week, not next month, not next year, but now. Because there will be no next year or year after left under this Minister of Finance. And sir, if the rest of the cabinet want to hold his hand, hold it. Because they too are not far behind him. In fact, there may even be those who suggest that he is more competent than most of them. That is true. But his level of competence is still incompetent by other standards.
Normal standards, by normal standards.
And I say to you, sir, how does the Nation newspaper send a journalist to Washington and he does his job? The IMF meetings and the IDB meetings, remember, for St. Peter can tell you, are meetings where people attend. There are a lot of seminars, there are a lot of speeches. But the substantive business takes place generally in 2 meetings. The meeting between the Caribbean countries and the director of the IMF, that one should forever stand in the memory of the Minister of Finance, because he allowed a governor who had no locus standi as a minister to curse Madame Lagarde, the managing director of the IMF, in a way that today people still reflect on as out of order behavior, because he had no locus standi. If he had locus standi, he could tell her whatever he wanted. But the person who should have been speaking was not the second half of the couple, but the governor had no right speaking and was allowed to speak. But the nation sends somebody, and that person does their job by the nation corporation. But the Minister of Finance, in whom is vested the responsibility for the orderly development of our economic and fiscal affairs, goes to Washington, spends 5 days there. I don't know if it is because he was upset by what the vice president, executive vice president of the IDB told him, but he never turned up at the bilateral with the IMF. Now your whole country stands in balance. There are those who are commenting that they do not know how the government of Barbados will reach safety in terms of, 1, their ability to pay their bills by March, and 2, the free-falling reserves that have taken place. We are now at a stage of import cover, sir, that we have not reached for virtually 20 years. And I expect before sun sets today, The governor of the central bank will seek to come and speak through a release to this country and through a press conference tomorrow. But remember this, sir. We are now at a peculiar stage where no September 30th information can help the members of the cabinet or indeed the country. And I know this. How many members of cabinet know the true state of the reserves in Barbados today? How many of them have been told? I wonder if the Prime Minister has been told. And what is sad, sir, when a country has reached the point where we can lose 1/3 of our reserves in 6 months, then it is time to draw breaks. And if there was no other matter to speak on in this debate alone, this government has a duty to the people of Barbados in whose name they temporarily serve. Temporarily, and I do not have to define temporary. In whom they temporarily serve to explain to the people of this country. Sir, rumors abound where there is an absence of conversation and leadership. And some of the rumors may not even be true. But that's what happens when people do not lead from in front. And if the government feels by language that the Clico debate should have been punished by laughter, by behavior, they have shown that they feel that this motion is unworthy of their response or that it is an admission of guilt. One of the two. But in whichever case, there can be no further confidence in the Minister of Finance to act in the name of the people of Barbados, particularly when by his own actions, his own statements, and by his behavior, he has shown a dereliction of duty and an undermining of the confidence. So I talked about this statement this morning, and I'll go back to it because it's going to be topical. How can you announce in here, the Minister of Finance gives you what? Tax incentives for whom? For construction. Do you know that the major stumbling block with the IDB, the first tax initiative announced by the Minister of Finance in this budget, in the grid, because there's no words, is the reduction of tax incentives and waivers of duties? Because the IDB has said, look, you have over, we thought it was 500 million. The minister said in his speech, 700 million value of tax incentives and duty-free waivers. And that the IDB and others have said to the government of Barbados, you have to cut that down as part of your fiscal adjustment program. What is the first bill that comes to Parliament after the Minister of Finance speaks in the budget? A cultural industries bill that is premised only on duty-free incentives and tax waivers. And even if you want to argue that the sandals incentives will lead to foreign exchange, the immediate range of incentives under the cultural industries bill is primarily for local usage and practice. We would want there in the future for there to be total exports of cultural industries, but we're not at that stage. So the first bill that this government brings after the budget, check the sequence of events. Let me check it. The first bill that we bring is a bill that repudiates the very Minister of Finance's statement, the very first initiative in the budget. The second thing that is done is that that same bill creates a new statutory corporation. And what does the Minister of Finance say in this budget? That he has a study that is coming to Cabinet in December to cut a number of statutory corporations, and it is called Public Sector Restructuring, and it covers on page 67 of the budget areas from public housing, sports, facilities management, investment, youth and cultural affairs, and sport, expending close to $130 million. It says culture. Last week, Tuesday, as this House was meeting, you know that there was a meeting of all of the statutory corporations from Urban Development, Rural Development, National Housing Corporation, COMI, National Sports Council, Gymnasia. All of them were up there to shut down a rationalization, to plan a rationalization. And this Parliament is in here passing the creation of a new statutory corporation. What is the Minister of Finance going to do when in estimates the Minister of Culture says, you've created a corporation? The Minister of Finance also said in this budget there's to be a freezing of posts. So you create a corporation not to create posts, not to hire anybody? Or is this just plain as if we making as if? Sir, Barbados deserves better. Barbados deserves better. And sir, I come into that. Before I get there, let me go back to sandals. There is no department that is in charge of tax administration any part of the world that can extend incentives for operations and use criteria for investment undertaken by a third party as the reason for tax incentives for operations. And you know, sir, what has happened? They had to find a way to justify how to give sandals these incentives while not giving the rest of tourism people. So you set a threshold of a $500 million investment because there's no such hotel here which has had invested in it $500 million. But guess what? The court can see through that too, as will the hoteliers who still wait. They don't even want that. They just want you to spend a little bit of money, Minister of Finance. Let them go and do a little marketing. You know that there's been no marketing in the marketplace. You know that Barbados Tourism Authority, you have presided over giving them $88 million in 2011 to market our most important earner. And then 2012, you come and give them $59 million and know that you owe it $27 million by your admission. And then you come and tell them, take this. I'm giving you a $50 million US that you can't get cent one from because you don't even know you're going to get a $100 million US loan. And 270,000 people out there suffering in this country. You are the $1 billion problem. There used to be a $6 million man called Lee Majors. But you are $1 billion problem. A $600 million stimulus in March, and you top it off now with a $400 million adjustment. Now, if ever there was a $1 billion problem, it is the Minister of Finance, and it is too heavy a price for this country to take.
And he's not even bionic, at least he ain't even bionic.
The member for St. James Central reminds me that he has no bionic powers. If, you know, sir, sir, I feel passionate about this. You know why, sir? I used to feel a sense of pride. Opposition, I started in opposition. I felt a sense of pride representing this country because people looked up to Barbados. People now ask what happened to Barbados. People are being called in at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Private sector people. People are being called in all about in international institutions. If the Minister of Finance had the growth of this economy in his heart, he would not allow money to be deprived from the rum industry to bring a case against the US government. $500,000 US is all that is required to save an $80 million industry a year. $80 million a year. And Mount Gay Refinery, sir, shut down 2 weeks ago, only now to be sold. And sir, you know what is sad? That the government of Barbados will spend that same $1.5 million or more in constituency councils, but would not spend it to save a $80 million industry. And an industry where the word rum comes from Barbados, where we have a globally competitive product. Sir, it is not...
Honourable member, you have 5 minutes in which to conclude.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I am saying to you, sir, that we are lawmakers. We are not lawbreakers. And you know, sir, the honourable member, last night I went back because, you know, sometimes it's good to listen. And I listened to the former member for St. John's speech in Bayville. And you know what he said? He said every leader of the opposition in Barbados has been accused of wanting to get somewhere in a hurry and to be power hungry. This is not about me today, sir. This is not about anybody on this side. This is about the fact that when a country reaches a situation where you lose 1/3 of your reserves in 6 months, call for help. Call for help. And when a country reaches a situation where it has never ever had any of its bonds undersubscribed, never ever had a message from the market that its credit was not good, call for help. And when a country reaches a situation, sir, where it is carrying as arrears 20% of its expenditure on an annual basis, call for help. And when a country reaches a situation, sir, where the first cut that is applied after the budget speech is to the police, who have to preserve law and order, who now would have had, after the police make the cuts in this fiscal year, the member for St. Joseph would have told you, if we had continued, let this charade continue here today with the government. You know what the member would have told you? That of the flexibility allowances remaining, the charade is the lack of action on silence and seriousness on the government. That of the flexibility allowances remaining for the rest of the fiscal year, there is less than $70,000 left to pay policemen for another 5 months of the year after they take out what is owed to them for crop over. Now, how can you apply a butcher's knife? And then, as fate would tempt us, 2 public health problems break out that have led to serious consequences. Pharmaceuticals in problems. 1/3 of your buses, the first thing that goes when you're in trouble, Mr. Speaker, is your goods and services. That's where you cut back first. But the problem is that $391 million is all we spend out of $3.7 billion in goods and services. So there's only so much cuts you can do. We in Barbados are spending, I want the public to listen to this, $1.2 billion in interest and debt. Another $870 million in wages in the central government. Another $1 billion, of which 65% comes from wages in statutory corporations, Water Authority, Conservation Commission, Sanitation, etc. 1.2 and 870 is almost 2.1. 2.1 and 650 is 2.750. And look at the estimates for how much we spend on pensions, sir. Retirement allowances, $250 million. So $3 million of the $3 billion of the government's expenditure is either debt or people through wages and pensions. You know what the revenue of the government of Barbados will be as predicted by the Minister of Finance, sir? $2.264 billion. 2.264. Do you understand that this is a train that is out of control? And all the talk about the U.S. government unemployment today was announced at 7.2%. You can find no company from them, for the misery. But sir, this page tells the story of all that is wrong. The Minister of Finance came to this country with a budget to do 3 things. Reduce the deficit, arrest the decline in foreign reserves, and lay a platform for growth. None of the initiatives are actually coming out of the ground in relation to growth. So you can ignore Appendix 2. Everything is a promise, a promise, a promise. None of the initiatives in Appendix 1 in relation to expenditure and revenue, you have to add up. The minister said that we have a deficit before he brought this budget of 9% of GDP, and that he would only cut $88 million in expenditure in the rest of this fiscal year. This Parliament approved $3,876 million in March. The minister tells you and wants the people of this country, that is probably why this page is not available online, but to those who it was distributed to in the House, we have the evidence. The minister tells you 88 from 3,876 is now to be 3,440. So he can falsely get to a projected deficit of 5%. Mr. Speaker, not even the head boy at Eagle Hall Primary can subtract 88 from 3,876 and get 3,440. You get 3,788. What is the implication of that, sir? That instead of a 5% deficit, that come March 31st, this country will carry a deficit that is near double digit. That you will have carried Barbadians through panic, through fear, through hardship, and still end up where you were or worse come March. Sir, the Minister of Finance is a luxury that the people of Barbados can no longer enjoy and endure.
Member, please,
he is a $1 billion problem. And I say to his colleagues, the price for your silence has been your vote. Let it live with your conscience. This debate is not about today. This debate is a year from now, 2 years from now, when the people of Barbados will stand and hold you responsible for not taking the right decision at the right time. We are not yet at crisis in terms of our reserves, but we are at a worrisome level in terms of the rate of decline, that if we act now, we can avoid what Jamaica has had to endure, 40 years of economic wilderness. I'm obliged to you, sir.
I'm obliged. Yes, Honourable.